traveling to consciousness, exploring spiritual journeys to find answers in uncertainty.
What is up, conscious monkeys? Welcome back to another episode of Traveling to Consciousness. As always, I'm your host, Clanky Terry. And in today's podcast, we have a rather unusual and seemingly unique story. The history of Max Lowen. Now, in our podcast today, I do give it like a little bit of a brief emphasis, if you will, an intro that we might be talking about heavy stuff. Now, the stuff that we talk about, I can't say that it's as heavy as I've seen her on other podcasts. So if you want to go deeper, and maybe this is a good way to put it, is like if you really want to go deep into her story and hear the things that she's been through, you got to go find it on another podcast. This podcast, in my opinion, I think it does a good job of getting like more of like a high level overview of Max, her opinion, her views on the world, just based on how she was brought up. Now, with that being said, I know I've listened to a lot more podcasts of hers than the average person. And so I know I'm going to have her back on in the future. So what I would really appreciate is if when you're listening to this, let me know or take notes of like what more questions you would have, because, you know, whenever I do these podcasts, I kind of get into this almost flow state of like trying to feel where the conversation's going and asking like the most intuitive thing that comes to me, because I know there's times where you hit an intersection and there could be like 20 different questions to ask. And I just have to pick like the one that I see as being most prevalent. So whenever I'm going through this, when we're going through this podcast, I would really honor it. And honestly, I think it would benefit other listeners of this podcast if you were to just take a note on like what we're talking about and then your question that you would ask her. And then we'll bring her back on the podcast and I can like read off those questions, because I know like this story is very unique, and unfortunately it's not one of a kind, but it's not something that you hear every single day. So I encourage you to listen to it with open ears, see what you can learn from it, and hopefully we can all learn something together, because I want to hear your perspectives on it, and then like follow up questions of like, okay, like what validates this? What proof is there for this or that or this or that? So please let me know in those regards, and I appreciate you all. And again, I know this is a heavy podcast because we do get into some very dark stuff, but again, I think it's very important to understand that these elements do exist within our world, because just turning a blind eye to them does not make them go away. As a matter of fact, it makes them worse. So please, if you can, stick through it. I believe in you. Stay calm, and I'll see you on the other side of this podcast. What is up, conscious monkeys? Welcome back to another episode of Traveling to Consciousness. As always, I'm your host, Clanky Terry. And in today's podcast, we have the amazing, the incredible Max Lowen with us. And before we jump into this podcast, make sure you're grounded, make sure you're calm, make sure you're relaxed, because the information that we're going to talk about in this podcast is very, very jarring, to say the least. It might be some of the darkest things that definitely have been ever discussed on this podcast, but even the darkest things that are probably happening on this planet as a whole. And I just want to make sure that that's very well cleared. I think I don't know how people listen to this podcast, but if you listen with kids, highly recommend you listen to this on your own before, you know, putting this out there to anyone else. So just want to make that known. Make sure you're checking internally to stay calm to the best of your ability. And with all of that being said, I think this is a very important information to be out there, just to be aware. You know, understand that it's what's happening, understand that there is a way past this. And I think Max does an excellent job of discussing those types of things, but we have to understand what's happening in order for us to get to a better place. So with that advisory out of the way, Max, thank you so much for being here. It's truly an honor to have you. And I can't wait to dive into your story with you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
So I think it's always difficult to know where to start with these things, but maybe the best place to start is, what is the first memory you have of kind of being a kid? Like, what was the life you were born into, that started this roller coaster of a journey?
Give me a sense. What are you exactly? I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Well,
How? Go ahead.
so so maybe you've done a lot of these podcasts, right? What do you feel
Yes.
like is a great starting point for people to maybe be aware of before jumping into maybe
Mhm.
the to get a sense of maybe where you've been, or to set a groundwork for the conversation we're about to have?
So, speaking of maybe a first memory, I have a memory of before incarnation, where I was actually at some kind of meeting with other beings. Some looked human, some didn't. And um, the earth was being discussed, this planet, what was going on here, the spiritual war that's been going on here between good and evil, and that things were not going well, and a strategy. And I remember volunteering to come here and to come into a body and to be here. So even from a very, very young age, I never forgot that. I always did have a sense that myself and many of us have purposefully, maybe all of us have purposefully come here. And, it's an experience in form in a body, but, this planet and humanity and really all life has been in trouble. And so many of us came to, I think people have a misconception about what it is to be spiritual. The New Age, which is a program, it's like all love and light and unicorns and, just don't look over here, don't pay attention to evil. Well, that is convenient for evil. It can flourish that way. To me, being spiritual is being a warrior and coming here to do our part, each of our parts, to make the situation here better. And I don't think anyone can deny today that the situation is pretty dire.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think, there's a lot of things that come to mind with that, right? We see the mass amount of wars that seem to be carrying out, and even myself, right? I've been to, I think, 13 or 14 countries at this point, and everywhere I go, everyone seems amazing. Beautiful, loving
Yeah.
people who treat you with the warmest hospitality. Everyone's great. Seems like a great time. Of course, there's bad areas. Not to go down dark alleys in certain cities and whatnot. But it always kind of struck me as strange where, you're not supposed to like people from a certain country, of a certain ethnicity. And it always kind of seemed like if you will, a general narrative that kind of gets flushed out there. So is that kind of what you're touching on, where there's almost this divide that keeps occurring on this planet?
Yeah, and the dividing us humans is intentional, right? And as you say, I grew up in 5 different countries. I've been to many, many more. People are good. We're humans. We have a heart. We feel each other. We help each other. Any natural disaster, everyone runs out to help the other person, right? That's our true nature. So it's not about us, the people. We only actually have one common enemy, and it's the people that run this planet. It's the authority figures, it's the people at the highest echelons of every industry and structure on the planet. And so they create these programs to divide and conquer us. It's a war strategy. If we're divided against each other, then we're not strong and we're not realizing that we only have one common enemy, which is them. So we're taught, to consider, I call it otherifying, right? So in World War One, they discovered that men who went to war had trouble killing people because it's not a human thing. We don't want to
Mm.
do that. We feel each other, right? So they enlisted the help of psychiatry, and they sort of had to come up with programs, mind programs, to assist to make humans more amenable to killing other humans, right? And so it's this
Wow.
concept of seeing someone as other. So I call it otherifying, right? And so, the Reds, the Japs, the commies, you create this way that people can see another human being as a monster, as so different that they're, that then, and it did work. So by World War II, that transition had happened and people were more easily programmed to kill. And then, of course, if you just look at TV and movies, I mean, how many acts of violence, starting with children's cartoons, are thrown at us constantly, constantly. It's just, it desensitizes, it makes everything normal. So, yeah, we're programmed to hate each other based on these engineered differences that don't really exist. I mean, we're one human race, but we've been taught to fight about race, about gender, about sexual orientation, religion, class, like you name it. There's some category where we're supposed to be opposed to each other. And, in the last few years, it was whether you took injections or you didn't. So they're always coming up with new categories. But, we hopefully we shouldn't fall for that, because we are in a war, but the only common enemy is them. It's not each other. We need to unite, actually.
Yeah, that's so true. And even deeper, I'm thinking not even deeper, but at the same level, I used to run and work on military like RPAs or military drones. So I was a software engineer, and I kind of started, I was in the kind of just creating the software, kind of detached from what was actually happening. And I remember kind of seeing that, you basically it's kind of like how video games were programmed, right? It is, you have someone in a facility that's thousands of miles away from the drone that they're operating, and then they
Yeah.
just send a simple command and you can wipe out a large number of people very quickly. And it almost creates that detachment even further, right? Because I mean, World War II, like you're talking about, you had to be face to face.
Yeah.
And even if you want to go back further, a big thing I saw is like back whenever they had, they were fighting with swords, majority of the time most of the people wouldn't be killed. Like it would be decided pretty quickly which side would kind of run in fear because they didn't want to be killed, or the way it was worked. Like it was a very psychological war. And it seems like as technology has improved, let's say, or advanced, there's been even this more divide where you have these different layers that kind of get put in place between the human experience of, well, that's one other person and then this is me. And so I guess, we kind of go to the next layer of this, right? And what you've experienced, like what's there to gain from this? Like if it's the people, as you said, the people running this world, people in high powered positions, like what do they gain by having us hate each other based on sex, gender, ethnicity, the color of our skin, whatever it is? Like what's the goal there? Like why does somebody actually want people to be hateful and kill each other?
Well, the goal is control. And so if we're doing okay, and if we're healthy, and if we have, full use of our minds, then we're harder to manipulate and control. So they have an agenda. And so essentially it's about control. Just additionally, from what I know from growing up, the world is run by Satanists, they're pedophiles, and of course, they're psychopaths, right? So they do sacrifice children and to Lucifer, to the dark. And so they actually do derive pleasure, and they enjoy and do. So death is a sacrifice to them. This is something that they do, and it brings them all kinds of things, including power and all of that. And so when you talk about that, I'm talking about things I've seen, like babies and children being sacrificed, like underneath, way, way, way below, in the subterranean levels of the Vatican. But you can look at global things as war is a sacrifice of lives, right? If you inject people with biological weapons, that's a mass sacrifice too. if you poison the food and the water and the air, as they do now, and people die from that, that is also a mass sacrifice. So these people are doing these kinds of things to us in a variety of sneaky, hidden ways as well as outward ways. And, with wars are started and funded on both sides by the people behind the curtain. Okay, so they operate the planet like a chessboard. Okay, I'll do this here and this here for this agenda or for that agenda. So I hate to say it, but that's who these people are. So besides complete control, it's how they operate.
That was something I know my guru taught me very well, which was, and I kind of knew it, but didn't realize it until he said it outright, which was he was saying how, like, even the United States, or like specifically like the CIA or Mossad or MI5, all of these like goofy agencies, that they'll fund terrorist organizations to like cause
Yes.
this divide. And I guess I didn't never consciously knew that, but then he started telling me about it. I was like, oh, this makes sense. Like, how do these terrorist organizations have military equipment and whatnot? And then, you have the Fast and the Furious with the Obama administration. And then I think it just came out that the government, the US government mistakenly is what they said, or accidentally gave $250 million to the Taliban. And, like on the outside, it just seems like, okay, like, is this an accident? But the way you're putting this is that, and I'm inclined to agree, is that they're doing this on purpose to create this division, to create this hate. I mean, 9/11 is another good example, right? Is we were told to hate Muslims, hate all Muslims because, they could all just be potential terrorists. At least that's the brainwashing I know I was exposed to. But something you I guess put in there, right, is the idea of Satanists and pedophiles, right? This was an idea that I guess I was initially exposed to in college, and I didn't really fully understand what was being said. But I know there's a couple people I think who have touched on this. The one that comes to mind the most would be like Alex Jones, because he talked about this a lot with like Bohemian Grove. And again, he had video footage of it. He was even interviewing a senator, I think, at the time, who is still in close to the White House. I don't know if he's in the White House, but he's a high-ranking official. And he essentially acknowledged, everything that Alex Jones said as being true, and kind of like lambasting Alex Jones for being there. Of course, he hasn't been 100% correct, but those base level things, right? This idea of a satanic cult, pedophiles that are running the world. Like, I mean, I guess in your experience, or like, I guess I don't have any personal experience. It's kind of all hearsay to me. How do you know that is what's going on behind the scenes here?
Yeah, well, let me answer that, but let me just quickly speak for a moment as to what you were saying about the CIA and the Taliban and the terrorist organizations.
Sure.
So all intelligence agencies, CIA, Mossad, all of them work together. Okay, they're really one global intelligence agency with different, branches. And I would say that the CIA is itself the number one terrorist organization on the planet. So they create these different so called terrorist organizations in different places around the world. But it's all run and funded and orchestrated behind the scenes by the very CIA. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there so that people understand.
It's a good
So of
point.
course it's not a accident. Probably someone found the funding and so they had to explain it. But, like right before 9/11, when I don't know how many trillion dollars went missing, these all go to these black ops behind the scenes that fund all of these kinds of things. Okay. So I just thought I'd just mention that before we move on.
It's a good point.
Now, to your question, I do have, unfortunately, direct experience. And so I and many children with me were trafficked. And I was trafficked among the kind of the high level, what I'm going to call what they call themselves elites, right? And for me, it was through the Vatican, so it was more in Europe. But I have friends who have survived trafficking and have been trafficked, through the White House and throughout all the US. And really, it's a global operation. And so the people that, so the trafficking can have many forms. You can be given to someone. I've been taken to people's mansions and kept there for as long as, they wanted. Sometimes it's parties. So I've been taken with other kids to in cages to these beautiful, luxurious parties and mansions. And, myself and the kids were dressed up. And it's boys, it's girls, it's different ages, it's different races because pedophiles have their preferences. And then we would be just brought into the party and selected, okay, I'll take this kid, I'll take this, and then raped or tortured or whatever they want to do. Sometimes there would be parties outside in places that had grounds, so land, trees, and they're hunting parties. So the kids are either naked or dressed in certain costumes or something. And it's very fun for them. I want to kind of set the stage. There's drinking, there's drugs, it's festive. And then the kids are supposed to run and hide, and then they get hunted. Sometimes there's dogs, sometimes not. And then when kids are found, they're raped and tortured and a variety of things. And usually at the end of these parties, there's always like a big buffet table, and at least one child would be sacrificed. I hate to scar you by telling you this, but I have witnessed myself human babies be killed and then cooked and brought as the main dish. If you've seen the opening ceremony of the Olympics, where there's like a this silver dish covering that's open, and then there's a blue man or whatever.
Oh yeah.
They always sort of tell us what they're doing. So that's a way. It's spirit cooking. They're telling you that the human is the main course, and this is actually truly real. So so there's things like that. There's all manner of. I have, through the first 18 years of my life, have been and many other children too, basically served up to or bought or in some way given to these people as a sexual toy for them to use at will. And I don't want to name names specifically, but what I can tell you, and you can insert names right here yourself, anyone in any high level in anything like top layer of religious institutions, of the education institutions, the medical institutions, the mega corporations, the high levels of the media, of the entertainment industries, the military industries, etc. Like anyone that's in, of course, politics, presidents, global agencies, okay, people who head these big global agencies. These are the people that participate, that I have seen in these parties, and that are raping children and sacrificing them and eating them.
Wow. Yeah. I guess this brings up first of all, wow. Like, I don't think there's any words that I could put to that to even do it any justice. What I guess a big question that really comes to mind for me, right, is if they're at this high level of power and this is what's going on behind the scenes, how are you able to speak so freely about this? Is there like some sort of contract or something that's going on? Like it seems to me this would be type of information that they would want to squash. They wouldn't want to let this type of information out, or is that somehow a part of this agenda?
Well, they don't want this information to get out. And so for myself and many of my friends who have survived satanic ritual abuse, they have done everything to make us, either make us dysfunctional, make us not able to survive what they did, give us throw so much at us that we would never like heal ourselves. We would never step back into our power, and we would never open our mouths and speak out. So, for example, so these people know psychology. They know how to program people's minds. This is something you may have heard through MK Ultra or other such programs.
Yeah.
And so, like myself and most of my friends that I know that have survived this, for example, as one example, have had a suicide program put in us that if we speak out, we should commit suicide, right? So when I was in therapy and when I was speaking and telling these things, I was incredibly suicidal, to the point that I would drive to the train station, I would get up on the platform, and this overpowering feeling in me and voice would say, jump, jump, jump. And I wouldn't, and the train would come by, and then I'd wait for the next train, and I would fight it enough that then I would leave, get back in my car, and go home, right? So that's one example. So of how they would try to keep me and others from speaking out. Then, there's the pretty classic technique for anyone of discrediting people, right? So in movies and in Hollywood, they portray Satanism as like chanting and robes, and like it seems silly, it seems ridiculous. So then they kind of know that most people out there still today will think, no way, you're crazy, you're making it up. So the credibility
Mm.
factor is another thing that they rely on, that we won't be believed. Well, people just think we're nuts. Um, there are things like I have been banned from YouTube and Vimeo. And so we get, myself and others who speak out, we get harassed, you know, in different ways. And we know full well what that is. And, but I'm never going to give up. So, and people have said, like, what if they kill you? And I have said, well, then I will go down and my mouth will be talking until my last breath. I mean, what else is there? I didn't survive all of that to sit in the corner rocking and sucking my thumb. I'm going to do what I can to speak out, because, see, Clayton, children right now, as we're talking, are being raped, are being trafficked, are being put through horrific satanic rituals, which I can describe more of those if you want. But so it's, it's just, and probably also, like in my case, I mean, I have, my platform, Unbroken.global. I've interviewed a lot of people, and I really think it's important to say that what happened to me individually is being done to us on a similar level collectively, to wake people up to the fact that basically this global satanic cult runs the world. But maybe and I have a lot of people who know about me and follow me, but maybe I'm not big enough really at this point to be, you know, for them to invest a lot of money on. And then, frankly, right now, these people are going down. We're in a time of major transition. There's much more light coming in, which is why all of these things are being more and more exposed. Like, people are seeing more and more. So I don't know that they're going to bother with people. I mean, they can't go after everyone, right? So,
Mm.
I do know that there was an airplane with 62, I think, doctors in Brazil who were going to blow the whistle on the bioweapon injection, and describe, what's behind all of that. And that plane was crashed, right?
Mm.
Whistleblowers have come and gone, and then they commit suicide. I mean, we know this goes on, so they do this. But the last thing I'll say is, I think that many of us, we're in this time right now in this war where I think that judgment thing in the Bible is happening now. It's like, which side are you going to choose? Are you going to choose good morality? Are you going to operate from integrity? Or are you going to choose what's easy and comfortable and go to the side of evil and, for example, take money to do harm to other humans. So I feel like those of us that have chosen that path we have some divine protection, we all do, and I certainly know that I've had that. I mean, as crazy as it sounds with what I've been through, I've always felt divinely protected. I mean, I'm alive and I'm here. So
For
I hope
sure.
that answers your question. It's not like one answer. There's just a lot of components to it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I've noticed that with so many different topics that it seems like there's a ton of different answers or reasons to why things happen. And especially powerful things like this. So in and divine protection, I guess, was probably a part of that answer that I was thinking about as you were saying it. And so, right, if these are global Satanists, right, they believe in Satan, the energy of evil, um, the antithesis, let's say, of God or of Jesus, and then you're also here saying that you believe in Jesus and divine. I don't think you said Jesus, but divine at least. So
Yes.
so I guess if the Satan has to exist, then that would mean that if the people who run this world believe in Satan, then that would also mean that they believe in the opposite of Satan, right? Which would be God, or I mean, Jesus is the first name again that comes to mind, but let's just say God. So like, are you, I guess, do you believe that, but they control the church? So like, how do we unpack that? Like, is the Bible real? Is it not real? Is Jesus real? Is he not real? If the people controlling this world believe in Satan, like, what's your experience with that?
Well, yes, they do. And so the you can see, like, if you call it the source of all life, then what they align themselves with is the anti-source, right? So th- everything that they do is, I mean, and these people do, they have a hatred for, I'm just going to loosely call it God, okay? The word can be loaded, I am not in any way religious because from what I've seen and what I know, religion is also a program. It distorts that divine, that creator, that God, and it changes things and it twists things. So, per your question, the Bible, like everything, it contains a lot of true things, and then it contains the distortions, right? The best
Mm.
way to mind control is to have things that are true in the program and then add some things that, kind of twist things around. So, yes, I do believe in, I don't even believe, I know in there is a oneness, a creator, a God, a light that is everything, right? And the way I see it, every single life form, me, you, a cat, a tree, water, is an expression of this divine. So it's how God knows himself or herself. It's not even a gender, that's beyond gender, right? But is through every life form. So through my experience and my consciousness, through yours, through every life form's consciousness, we're all one. We're all from that divine energy, right? And it's experiencing itself through each of us. And that's what people mean when they say, we're all one. We are, and yet we're separate. It's kind of an illusion, but we have these seemingly separate bodies. Although, if you actually were to look at us with technology that shows our energy fields, where my energy field and the person next to me are overlapping,
Mm.
so that's not even really, really true. Matter is, it's an illusion, but we're here to play the game in this way. So of course I know that that is the case. And in some respect, these stories in the Bible are sort of true in the sense, and we're anthropomorphizing, but let's just go with that. So yeah, Lucifer turned against God, right, and wanted to be God. And so the people that have run this planet, that at the top of that pyramid, they want to be worshipped as gods. And so that's the inversion, and everything is inverted. Everything that is of God they want to completely invert. And this is why, they particularly go for children, because a baby and a child is the closest thing to God. So
Hmm.
even in raping a child, it's an fu to the creator, right? It's also a stealing of life force energy. So keep in mind, when let's just say in the story of Lucifer, when you go against God, these people have severed their connection, right? They've turned away from it, and so they don't have that connection to the life force. So it's kind of like the sun and the moon. The sun has its life force energy, and the moon has a light, but it's a reflection of the light of the sun. So you can say the dark has its false light, but it's a reflection of the true light. And actually, as they tell us in movies, that's a form of disclosure. Like Morpheus says to Neo in The Matrix, we are their batteries. They use our life force energy. Through us, they create this hell on earth reality. So hell and heaven aren't places, they're frequencies, they're levels of consciousness, right? And so these people are going to create a reflection of them here on the planet, but they still do it through us, which is kind of the bad news, but kind of the good news. Because if it's through us, we can change this. And really, the big secret they don't want us to know is that because we are connected to God, we are actually inherently more powerful than they are.
Wow. And that must drive them crazy.
Yeah.
And so then I guess the next layer of this, and this kind of comes back, I guess, to the whole CIA terrorist situation, right? Is what's coming to mind is I know like in 2009 in Sri Lanka, they had Buddhist terrorists. And I remember reading this story. I didn't know about it till maybe like 6 months ago, 9 months ago. But like Buddhism, in my opinion, or what is taught is like life is sacred. Let's have peace, never, they don't even kill like ants or whatnot. But then there was Buddhist terrorists going around, and I think like over 100,000 people they like brutally murdered, they brutally raped, and I just couldn't wrap my head around that. And so this seems to be kind of like what's coming back to what you're saying of this, like stealing this energy. So is it every religion that is? I don't know how to articulate it. Is every religion evil? Is it possessed by evil? Like what? I mean, what are your thoughts on, I guess, connecting those two dots?
Well, I know this is a very, touchy subject because people, they go to their churches, whatever that is. And again, humans are good. Okay. So human beings, when they participate in a religion or worship or go to church, they are trying to cultivate and honor that relationship with the divine. Okay. So I'm not taking that away at all. I'm just saying that the way it's set up is set up to actually cause a rift between us and the divine, primarily, and most obviously by creating this idea that God is something outside of yourself, right? When it's actually inside of us, it's the essence of us, right? I mean, we're a body with a soul in it. So that's kind of tricksy on their part. They are saying that God is this thing out here. And then, God has certain rules. And in the Bible, like everything, there's many true things and real things, and then there's many distortions. But if you look at the Old Testament, God is jealous, God is wrathful, God demands a sacrifice of your firstborn. Like, no, that's not God, people. That's Lucifer, that's Satan. Okay.
Hmm.
So I have a problem with religion because and again, it's not the people's fault who participate in that religion. They don't know this, but here's the Vatican as an example, right? And so they're supposed to be, the center of the Catholic Church. And if you've ever been to the Vatican, I mean, my God, it's beautiful. The architecture, the art, it's incredible. But way underneath that beautiful structure are these rooms in the subterranean levels. And, one of them that I've been taken to many times contains a big altar, marble altar, where they bring in children and sacrifice them. Okay. So what is that? That's not of God. But so the Vatican is masquerading as a good place, but really underneath, in the underbelly of it, they're doing horrific things, right? And then you have to look at things. So see, like I said, we're the sun, they're the moon. They have to harvest our energy. Everything's energy. So they have to harvest our energy. So for example, they have the ritual of communion. And I know this has gotten people mad at me for saying this before, but I'm just going to say it. You eat the body and drink the blood of Christ. I mean, that's what I saw them doing with real humans. Okay. So it's put into a ritual. People unknowingly participate in this ritual. It's a satanic ritual. It's harvest. You're putting yourself and your energy into this. So you're like funding it, okay, for them. They take that energy. I have a friend who is a survivor within the Mormon church, and I've interviewed her on my platform. And she talks about how, as they do these, they have the people worshiping and whatever, and then right underneath, below on a level below, they're doing some dark rituals, so they're harvesting that energy. If you go to Mecca, where that black cube is a satanic symbol. Unbeknownst to the worshipers, when they circle it, they're creating a vortex of energy that's being siphoned off, and that's being used for ill. Remember, they have to use our energy. That's why they have sports games in these stadiums. The stadiums are designed as energy harvesters and conductors, and then you get, so et cetera, et cetera. So that's the problem with religions, is that they distort the divine. Having said that, I'm not saying, I'm not taking away the true intent that people have when they are going to the churches to pray. And that doesn't mean that the priests in local churches aren't good people and aren't trying to do good. And it does, and many of these congregations do really good things for the homeless or for each other, or so they're really beautiful communities. So I want to be very careful not to demonize that, but yet explain that when it's from the top down, these structures, they're designed to separate us. Actually, it's like put themselves between us and God is here. Us and God are connected, but they insert themselves in the middle, right? And then they use our energy for dark purposes. So I hope that answers your question.
Definitely. And I know, going back to my mentor again, that was something that he was teaching about as well, was that it's not necessarily the people, but more that they're possessed by certain energies, right? You talked about communion. He told me about that, which blew my mind. And the more I thought about it, I was like, wow, like there's truth there. And he went even to the level of talking about like the symbol of Jesus and dying on the cross, how he's unconscious, his face is bloodied, he's nailed, and he was saying like how you're giving your energy to the entity that did that to him. It's not going to him as everyone thinks. And, this kind of touches on, I think, programs that you were talking about earlier, which is, it seems like there are a lot of physical world programs that we unconsciously go about, right? Whether it's, praying to Jesus on the cross, maybe there's, I haven't heard about the stadiums. I'm not sure how that works, but it doesn't surprise, let me put it like this. It doesn't surprise me that there are different patterns of energy that physically kind of get laid, if you will, that create this like distortion as like physical humans. So, I mean, I guess maybe we should touch on those programs, right? And you brought up MK Ultra, and my understanding, right, is that they were just giving LSD to people and trying to program their mind. And I guess I agree at the same level of like, okay, there's programming here with like TV, right? They tell you something over and over again, and it eventually gets into your mind that this person's awful, it's the Democrats' fault, it's the Republicans' fault, right? Like you hear that enough times, you start to create it as truth. So maybe if we take a step back to MK Ultra and like mental programming, you hinted at that, and I think you even said that it's a lot more than just LSD being given to people. So kind of like what's going on with programs? How do we identify programs? How do we break programs? Or at least let's start at the first part. How do we identify programs that are of like this demonic nature?
Well, the first thing to know is that it's everywhere. We're all programmed. We are in a culture. The word cult is included in that word, right?
Never noticed
And
that.
so there's individual, like me and people I know have been individually programmed MK Ultra, and I'll explain that. And no, it's not just LSD. That's what they told the public. And no, it never stopped either. It still goes on to this day. But let me tell you, so there's collective programming too. So it's the use of trauma. So they understand psychology. If you throw a trauma at a human being, it overwhelms them. It what it does is you shatter, you dissociate, you fragment. This is at one extreme what a multiple personality is, right? It's the person had so much trauma they split into different people to hold the trauma so it doesn't kill them and destroy them. So these people know how the mind works. So they use trauma, and then the person, when you're in shock, you're blank, right? And then that's the state where you can put programs in. You can put any program in. And this is the technique that they use. So I'll describe on the collective right around the end of World War II. For example, the Tavistock Institute was created, right? And it was kind of a marriage between psychiatry, military, the eugenics movement. And they, in their mission statement, they say that their goal was to create a one world global government and full control of humanity. And how were they going to do that? They were going to use future shock. Okay. It's so they have done that. Wars, things like 9/11, which are deliberately done, pandemics, violence of all sorts, even scarcity, all of this, even the poisoning of us in various ways. So it's a shock, and then humans are, and then they put in all the programs that they want, and they know that fear is very, very successful because of the way the human brain is set up. When you're in fear, it's the reptilian, so-called reptilian brain, and it's programmed for survival. So if there's a threat, you go into fight or flight, or if those are not available, freeze. And in that moment of the danger, let's say there's a big scary animal in front of you about to eat you, this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, shuts down because thinking takes too many seconds, you'd be dead. So it's a reactive brain. So you just react. You fight or you flight, or if you can't do that, you freeze. And so they know how the brain works. So they also use fear. So mind control, it's repetition. If you repeat the same lie over and over again, people are going to believe it. Then you introduce fear, so you dissociate. You introduce shocking things that are overwhelming the person, and then so it's like it sort of paralyzes the person, and then they're very easy to program. The subconscious is right there, so put the programs in. And on an individual level, what with MK Ultra and things like that, they do this to us. They have done this to me and people I know as children. So it's you're forced to watch them painfully murder another child or an animal, or you're raped, or there's horrible tortures, electric shocks, being buried alive with dead bodies, being waterboarded, all these extreme tortures. And then what happens is the child is goes into that state, and then so it's a blank slate, and then they call it alters, right? So then they program the alter. So that's how they create super soldiers, honeypots. If children have psychic abilities, they'll use those abilities. They'll create like an alter that can be a psychic assassin. I know this sounds like a movie, but I swear to God, this is real. And so that's what they do with an individual, but they do this collectively, as I just said, to all of society as well. So it's the use of trauma and shock. It's the knowledge of how the brain and the neurology of a human operates. It's a knowledge of how to program someone when they're in that state to, and then with the alters, that they have inserted in many people as children through these techniques, the there'll be a front personality and there'll be these trained alters, but you won't be aware of them. So for example, these lone wolf assassins that have killed like JFK or whoever, they're supposedly just crazy random guys who went and shot. No, they're MK Ultra. They're programmed to do a task, but then because of the way the programming is so well done, there's a trigger word or something that makes them go do what they've been trained to do. But then afterwards, they're not going to remember it because it's in a different alter. So they genuinely can never say who told them to go do these things. So
Do you think that's what
it's kind of
happened
a
with?
bit of a rabbit hole, I know.
Definitely a rabbit hole. Do you think that's what happened with President Trump recently?
Well, yes. And, if you want my opinion, I think that was orchestrated, so, but if the person, that doesn't mean that the person who allegedly fired the shot wouldn't have been MK Ultra. Yes, he probably absolutely would have been, as any of these people are. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Wait, so you think it was orchestrated in the sense that he was probably exposed to like one of these MK Ultra programs before doing that? Is that what you were saying when you said orchestrated?
Well, so
I know it's not your, I guess it's like, it's a little bit of a fuzzy. It's just, I'm curious what your
yeah,
opinion is. I know it's not going to be factual.
I might be unpopular for saying this with your audience. I don't know, but see, we're also, one of the programs we're all subjected to is the Savior program. There's always somebody that's going to ride in on a white horse and save us. But see, these people behind the scenes, so at the level of politicians and presidents, there's people behind them who run them, who give them orders. So the left and the right are really wings off the same bird. Okay. So there's no good guy at that level. They're just actors and they're playing scripts that they're given. And these powers that be, their psychological operations are very complex. Okay. So they will create the boogeyman and they will create the savior. Okay. It's again to keep us, so these kinds of psyops are to keep us from not stepping into our power and not doing anything. So as an example, I'll tell you like the Q thing. That's a psyop. Okay. So the Q is saying all these true things, okay, because their audience are people who are awake to a certain level. They're awake to the mainstream BS, right? So they're going to say the truth, but there's going to be a twist. So the twist is trust the plan and do nothing. Wait for someone to come and take care of everything. And it's disempowering. Okay. So, and somebody said to me, no, that's not possible because they're putting out all these things. Why would they tell people all these true things? And I pointed out to them, the masses that are mind controlled into believing the mainstream will never believe the Q anyway. They'll think it's crazy conspiracy theory. The programmed mind will not let in what it's not capable at their level of consciousness of letting in. So they can say all the truth they want in this level of Q because the sheeple, as some people call them, will never accept it as truth anyway. They'll reject it. It's part of the program, it's part of the mind control, right? So that's designed for people who've already jumped to a higher level, but then they're going to be kept from going to a higher level by the psyop in that bit of truth, right? So unfortunately, I'm just going to say, this is my perspective and my opinion, and I'm okay if people disagree. I think we all need to form our own opinion, but I don't think there's anyone good in that system because that system is designed and owned by these cult people. See? So, there it is. I've said it.
It's okay. No, it's very interesting, and I think that's always something that I've kind of like looked for, maybe whenever I've looked at politics, if you will. I know there was I don't know how closely you follow politics at all, but I always try to see if there's like someone who just like at least brings some sort of light, if you will, right into the mix. And I know one of the people who I was like a big fan of was Thomas Massey. I don't know if you are familiar with that House representative. He's from Kentucky. He like was proposing like legislation about like clean air, clean food. He was talking about stock market trading. He went all the way to going on Tucker Carlson, where and I don't know if this kind of gets into the spiritual aspect of it. Well, it definitely does. But I would be also, maybe this is another case study that I'd be interested in your opinion on. He went on Tucker Carlson and started talking about like stuff that was sort of pseudo behind the scenes. So like, for example, he was talking about how everyone has like an APAC person with like Israel, who kind of feeds them information of like what they should sign and do. And after like maybe 2 weeks after this podcast, his wife passed away in her sleep. And it was like, he went on Twitter, said there was like nothing inconspicuous, like no one broke in. To me, something always just kind of felt off there of like, well, the timing of this and the things that you're proclaiming, like there has to be something here that I'm missing, or like a mismatch of energy, if you will. So is it like, and I guess this is like a theory I'm just coming up with here, but is it like the soul somehow, like his soul would somehow know what actually happened there, like, and they're controlling that at like a soul level, and there's like some sort of agreement between them that he isn't consciously know of? Or am I going like deep down just uncharted territories here?
Well, like I said before, there's good people. Okay, good people go into politics. Good people go into medicine. They don't know that Rockefeller created the allopathic medical system to poison us, slow kill us, and profit off it. They think they're going to help people. There
Mm,
are politicians, there are good people who go into politics to make a difference, right? And so the problem is when they speak up and when they want to actually do something good that's against the higher level agenda, things will happen. It's entirely possible, like I don't know this guy, but if he were to have strayed into and tried to do something that they didn't want him to do or say, then they would just kill his wife as a little warning, right? And there is technology that we don't see. Trust me, there is way more advanced technology than we're told exists. There is technology that can give a person a heart attack or a brain stroke or an aneurysm. Like, there's many ways that they keep their people in line. So I would just point that out. And then, like you said, this person's like, want to pass legislation for clean air and, clean water. And this is the problem on the planet. People are like, well, we should have this. The people at the top are polluting the air and polluting the water and poisoning and GMOing the food and making us sick on purpose with the pills and the shots and everything, right? And the electromagnetic frequencies, it's always escalating. That's bio warfare right there. So maybe the solution would be stop doing all of this. Then we wouldn't have to clean anything up. So sometimes it's that's why nothing ever improves, because there's good people who address issue A or issue B or issue C, but with no awareness that the people up here are causing these issues, right? So that's the frustrating part. Like, and we can make a difference, but the people at that top of the pyramid are throwing all these things at us, and then
mm.
good people are trying to fix it, but It's like trying to plug a tsunami with a little hole with your finger in it. I mean, it's difficult.
Definitely. So, like, I mean, I'm assuming you've put at least some thought into this, right? As if there's all these people with massive amounts of political power, monetary power, influence, and I'm sure this even spans over to other industries than political, probably entertainment industry, music industries. I mean, we just saw P. Diddy. That's a whole rabbit hole in itself that I'm sure, he was involved in this as well. Is there any thought on how you change the system, right? If going back to this before life memory you volunteered to put your hand up, you volunteered to come here. I assume that there has to be some sort of bigger plan to fix this system. Is there any memories you have, or any sort of implication or thoughts you've had of how this gets fixed, how we put, let's say, good people in charge in leadership positions?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. But so on one level, we have help. Okay, we have divine help. We have beings of light that are helping, because what goes on here on Earth, from my memory and understanding, this planet is pretty critical. It's almost like a nexus planet. So what happens here affects other portions of the universe. And that's why there's so much help, right? Um, so there's that level of it. We have help. Um, the other answer to that question is, if you think of the pyramid, who's holding these people up at the top up there? It's us, it's that bottom layer. Okay. And like I said earlier, they do all their dirty work through us. And for one thing, that helps them avoid karma, by the way, because if we're doing it to ourselves or each other, if we're the ones doing the harm, we incur the karma and they don't. So they get human, like, Bill Gates isn't going around, vaccinating people. These people aren't flying the planes that spray the chemtrails. They aren't beating people on the street who are peacefully protesting. They're not going to fight in wars themselves. See? So it's humans that are enlisted to do their dirty work. So, if, for example, I mean, I'm sure it's a whole nother topic, but I'm sure you're aware of the extremely sexualized agenda for children now everywhere, including in the school system, right? And by the way, I consider that sexual abuse, because if you put that inappropriate level information to a child whose brain is still growing, this is extreme. You know how harmful porn is, right? So it's pornography aimed now at 5-year-olds in kindergarten. So as an example, you're a teacher in any one of these public schools. Walk out in mass, say, I'm not going to teach this because this harms children, and I took an oath to educate children, not to destroy them. Okay.
Hmm.
If you're in the police, and again, people go in for good reasons, they want to serve their community. But then if you're being given orders to beat up, like what's happened in the UK, to beat up and jail people who say, I oppose, migrants raping children, stop beating up your fellow humans. Stop following orders that are harming your fellow humans, and you know it. Don't let the little girl sell lemonade at a stand because because she doesn't have like, what the hell are you doing? Stop it. Don't do it. Say no. Don't go, kill other people, women and children in other countries because you're told to. If you're a doctor, don't accept large bonuses, large amounts of money per how many vaccines you give, knowing full well that you're harming people, etc. There's every single human that obeys the orders of these people and creates harmful conditions. I mean, who's piloting those planes that are spraying, aluminum and barium and parasites and all kinds of stuff on us and on nature? Somebody has to fly those planes, right? So what are people doing? That's really the answer. The biggest answer in my mind to your question is, we need to stop consenting and complying with psychopathic orders that harm us and any other life form. Without us, they can't do anything. They need us to execute their hell on earth orders, and we just have to stop doing it. Just say no. I mean, that's where our power comes from. There's billions of us, there's a few million of them, and they can't do all of this. They need us to do it for them. And sadly, humans are amenable to being bribed and given money and positions and titles and power, and will do horrible things for those worldly things. And that's where the morality comes in. We're in a war between good and evil. Like, what's your side? And yeah, people say, well, but it's my job. But if everyone said, no, I'm not going to do it, there's nothing that they could do. If everyone had said, I'm not going to lock down my business, that's my livelihood, nothing would have happened. It's the compliers that then make the issue, and then everyone watched the big corporations and the richest of the rich gain trillions of dollars during that period, where it was just another wealth, transfer upwards. So, but we're allowing this to occur. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And even at a deeper level, I know I started kind of rereading and maybe rereading, actually starting to learn the US Constitution. I know they brushed over that in my education system. And like in the very beginning of it, it says that, to the effect that, government is only there by the consent of the people. And I think that's a big piece that you're touching on here, which is the consent of letting these things happen. I feel like where this kind of gets difficult, right? If I'm putting myself in the mindset of someone who is a teacher, a doctor, so much of our world and economy even is just based on money, right? Like, you need money to survive. You have to have money. So how do you find that balance between, or how do you encourage yourself even to find that balance between, like, not consenting, but at the same time, protecting your livelihood? Like, I feel like that might put people in a big, speaking of fear as well, could put people in a very strong place of being afraid.
Yeah, and that is really the most difficult thing, what you're naming, because these globalists, this cult, have infiltrated and gained control of everything. Your paycheck, water, the food supply, everything, right? So they've really been very, very clever the way they've set the whole structure up. And so they actually do have full control. And we have already been in a one world government, obviously, because you saw the response of every country to this supposed pandemic. They all instituted the exact same, that never happens in reality. That tells you there was a one world government already.
Mm.
So that is a very, very good question. And I'm not saying it's easy, but we, I think, have to come up with creating the structures that are created to harm. They're created in such a way that, we're controlled. So we have to kind of, there's no use in fighting that. I think we have to go and create new things. So like, if you're a teacher and yeah, you have a paycheck, um, maybe get together with other teachers and with parents and create your own homeschooling kind of school, so the parents maybe don't have to do the teaching. Maybe the teachers, you can hire them and in a community and create like an alternative. And this is contrary to the top down global thing. This is up from the local level up, right? So you create something new, you create an alternative, so if the fruits and vegetables are sprayed with pesticides, as they are, and then get together with people, buy some land, start to grow your, I mean, you need like a little bit of a plot to grow enough to feed even just your family. What if people grew stuff, and then another person had some chickens, and another person had a couple of cows for the raw milk, which is so good for us, which they don't allow us to have. And then kind of it goes back to community, to helping each other. Like, I'll do this, you do that.
Mm.
Someone who has studied medicine, I mean, they're not trained completely properly. They're not trained in nutrition deliberately, because that is the single most important thing in our health. But if you have any skills as a doctor, and you realize that, oh shit, the system I'm working for is evil. You have a choice. There's always a choice. Okay, I'm going to go, and maybe that person leaves their license behind because they control you through the licensing, and then you're part of that system, and just says, hey, I'm here in the community, I'll come to your house, I'll do house calls, I'm a physician. And or you get with another couple and you just start to do your own thing outside of their control and their system. Now, it's scary because we've been conditioned to think that these people out here who call themselves authority figures get to tell us what to do, have the right to tell us what to do. I mean, that's essentially slavery. We're slaves if we think that, right? Um, it's not easy, okay, but to stand up in your integrity and your morality in this war, is anything ever easy in a war? No, it isn't. We're in a war. So where do you want, ultimately look at the bigger picture? Do you want to be, I mean, we're already slaves, but do you want to have your lifestyle even more reduced, as they're telling us you will own nothing and be happy? I mean, they're telling you what they're going to do next, right?
Right.
Like, is that the life you want? Or do you want something else? Well, then we have to work towards that something else. So it comes back to us. And what we have going for us is the divine. I think when you begin to do the right thing, you get assistance. It's like energetically, you create like this opening for others then to do that and to follow. And then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But somebody has to have the courage, or some people have to have the courage to just go there. It's really hard. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but from what I have thought of now, it's go out there and just start to do it differently. Use your skills. Like, if they decide to control us to turn off the grid or the transformers, and you're trained in that, go turn them back on, you know? Um,
Pretty simple.
it's not easy. It's not easy, but can we, and I mean, like you're doing, or like I'm doing, put out truth. So the media exists to brainwash people and propagandize. Well, now there's a lot of people who are using media to spread truth and hope and optimism. So whatever your skill set is, use it. We can create a different world. We're going to have to, because I think in this war that they're actually losing and going down. And so when one thing comes down, something else has to be there in its place. And if you think, this sounds overwhelming, right? But I have seen it over and over. There's well, I call them unnatural disasters because, there's weather warfare. But these things happen. People somehow, with no authority figure telling them what to do, run out and help their fellow humans. There's housing, there's clothing, there's food. We know how to do this stuff. Okay. So I mean, it's not a complete answer, but I think we really have to also start brainstorming how. I think your question is kind of open-ended and deserves a lot more thought than the little bit, that I can answer.
Yeah, definitely. But I think you did a great job there. I mean, I think a huge element of that is that piece of, let's say, having that confidence to move forward. So we're kind of laying out how, quite frankly, bleak, terrible the entire system is that we're living in right now. But what I've come to realize is that it means that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity that just lies, within our fingertips as well. And it seems to me, going back to me being a software engineer, right? And using my skills, my abilities for the military industrial complex isn't the best idea. I mean, you can take that route if you want, but it's playing into that same system that you're talking about. And instead directing my skills, where now I'm actually working on a platform called Amara, which is going to be a social media app. And so it's like a combination of Instagram, Twitter. It has blogs, recipes, exercise routines. We're about to do like another UI update, but you want to talk about programming. Our ethos is essentially like letting truth come out. We'll ban speech that is, essentially like if you're being mean to somebody else, like, yeah, we shouldn't do that, or we'll at least limit it in the algorithm. But like allowing, truth to come out, I think is very powerful. And, you're experiencing the amount of, let's say, blocks with like the current social media platforms. And to your point, right, taking on that monster of, oh, another social media app, another this. It's like, well, start taking the same steps. And if you're it seems like if you're going down a path to bring more of that light, more of that divinity into this new area, the more you'll be guided to new people. So like for us, we started with almost no money, pretty much no money. We got one investor at like $20,000, but in a couple of years we were able to create this, create an app. It has a lot of improvements, don't get me wrong, that needed. But I think to your point, right, to get back to that meta thing is like, how can you provide this? Coming back to your education piece, so many of those books, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the Instagram videos of how they're sexualizing kids. I mean, it's anti-human at the very least. And it seems to me, if we were going to break this down, because I really had to struggle like figuring this out, right? Because like at some point you have to teach people about sex. And I think where I kind of landed on is like, you need to protect the innocence of kids. So, there's probably a biological thing, and I go to puberty. So probably once you're hitting puberty, probably just after puberty, so like 14 to 16, it's probably a time you should probably start introducing the idea of sex, what your body's going through. But you do that before then, you're going to completely destroy their innocence. They'll get confused. They won't know what's right, what's wrong. Is it okay if I play with the person of an opposite sex? Is it not? Is this what sex is? Is that, and so you create that illusion or that, struggle within them, which feeds the, as you're putting it, feeds Satan essentially. And so I think what you're saying here, right, even though it's as bleak as everything is, it seems like right now, those who are willing to take the risk into that unknown, or at least set a path in the right direction, they'll find people, right? I'm sure if you go around the community and say, hey, I quit my job, I'm no longer going to teach these evil ways that are being taught within elementary school or middle school. And I'll teach the community, just, toss me like $10 per kid or something. I don't know what the numbers will come out to, but I'm sure you would be greatly rewarded for those actions, for, doing things in a way that benefit, humanity, as opposed to things that are contradictory to our human instincts.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that, and absolutely, there's an age appropriate time to teach everything. But what they're doing with this agenda is they're grooming children. They're trying to normalize pedophilia because they're pedophiles. Okay. And if you've seen it out there, I don't, I'm sorry, I don't even learn the names of these people, but the guy who's the VP for the Democrat side,
Waltz.
he's a Minnesota guy. Yeah. He passed legislation protecting pedophiles. There's an organization called themselves Minor Attracted Persons. It's like, no, no. And they say, oh, we're about love. No, raping a child is not about love at all. Like, please don't, we're in this age of Orwellian language, right? Where everything is, hate speech is or misinformation is actually truth, or it's all backwards. So they're trying to normalize, among other things that they're trying to do, they're trying to normalize pedophilia. This has been one of their agendas for a long time, for as long as I'm 60 years old. For decades I've known that, and they groom humanity little by little by little by little. So if you look at like the 40s or maybe even the 50s, it was different. Sexuality was different. It was more sacred. It's sexuality is a great thing, but they've drip socially engineered it into the way it is today. It's normal to hook up. You don't even know someone's name. You have sex with them. It's satanic. It's not that sex itself is wrong or bad, but the way that they have transformed it from something that has multi dimensions. It's physical, it's spiritual, in a healthy way. They've rendered it very distorted and unhealthy today, deliberately, because that's their way of doing it, right? And so we have to just be aware of these agendas, and they've gotten people today to consider, things that are kind of depraved and not healthy as completely normal, right? And so that's where it's really important to look at. So I have always looked at my own programs. What are my mental programs? What are my emotional programs? What are my behavioral programs? What, because when I worked on myself a lot, I mean, I've had to, like, what triggers us activates a program. And then that's why people react when they're triggered. There's something in us already that gets activated, and then we react. But most of the reaction and the energy behind that is from some original wound, right?
Hmm.
So we need to go in there and clean ourselves up. We need to figure out where we're distorted in our thinking, in our emotional reactions, whatever. So again, that's where I love radical personal responsibility. If you're going to change the world, start with yourself. It's the only way you're ever going to do anything. It's start with changing yourself. That's really the only thing that we have control over. So clean yourself up, find out, what makes you, or even clean up your body, stop eating processed crap and fast food and anything toxic. Stop getting drunk all the time or using drugs. Go exercise, go out in nature, sleep enough, meditate. Like, we need to get our temple, our soul, our mind back from all this crazy, traumatized, negative stuff that we've been given, and take ourselves back. And we can do that. We can do that. And then what happens is, when you get yourself back together, you step into your power. We have abilities. We're actually telepathic. We're actually self-healing. Okay. We're creators. We're made in the image of our creator. We are creators. If we have been used as batteries to create this hell on earth reality, we can change that and create a heaven on earth reality. We have this ability. We've just been convinced that we don't. We've been convinced that we have to look out here for someone to tell us, the priest has to tell us how to connect with God, the doctor has to tell us how to heal our body. We need to sort of take ourselves back, because we do have the power. Especially then we take ourselves and put ourselves together, and then we join with each other. Forget all those divide and conquers. We're one human race. Let's get together in a community. Okay, what do you need in a community? You need some clean food. You need someone to, uh, I guess, teach your children. You need some clothing. You need some energy to power things. Like, how can we go about helping each other and getting these basic things that we need going for each other? See, these psychopaths understand psychology. And there was a psychologist called Abraham Maslow, and he has this hierarchy of needs, right?
Hmm.
At the bottom, you need shelter, food, water, and safety. And you can't really go to the higher levels of yourself if you don't have those basic needs. Hence, we are in a planet where we have to work, 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 and struggle to put a roof over our head and food in our mouth, and we'll never feel safe. And like, that's deliberate. If you look at nature, it's in balance. It doesn't operate in this unnatural reality that has been created for us. So they keep us in survival, okay, so that we don't rise to our fullest potential. And actually, I love David Hawkins' Map of Consciousness. Go Google that.
Oh
He
yeah.
shows how certain emotions are survival emotions, and they're like a bandwidth of frequency. And then at the very top of the scale is like love and peace or whatever. So I think it's just a great visual. These people keep us in this survival frequency so that we will never rise to our true potential. But if we do, I don't even know what we could create and how quickly we could create it. I think we could. I think we could change this world in a second if enough of us are at that level of consciousness and have done our inner work and come together. I think they're scared of that. And that's why they poison us and divide us and keep us in low consciousness. Because, I mean, think about it, Clayton. Why would they go through so much effort to poison us in the electromagnetic field, the food, the water, the medicines, the propaganda thrown at us. Why all of that? Because because we're this powerful. Like, they're not doing all of this, unless they have to. And they have to because they have to keep us down here, because they know if we get to that full potential, it's game over for them. So I think that's what we need to focus on doing. Forget them. Let's work on, ourselves.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, it probably wouldn't take, you're talking about how there's like 1 million of them, there's 8 billion of us, but to me, it seems like almost we wouldn't need that many people, right? I mean, it would almost create a domino effect, right? You and I are
Yes.
having this conversation, let's say 5 people, it's not going to be 5 people, but let's say 5 people hear this conversation and it wakens them up a little bit, right? It creates
Yes.
this like chain reaction where they see 5 people, they see 5 people, and then it'll just snowball from there. And I mean, I love it. I'm all on board. I think that's very, very doable at, in the physical layer. And then I think even, I want to kind of bring it back to this because you brought it up again. You mentioned earlier about, how they would target people who had psychic abilities. And then you brought up telepathy being real as well.
Yeah.
I guess in the most blunt and curious way, like, how do you know that these psychic abilities exist and are innate? Are they innate within all of us? Is it just certain
Yes.
people? Like, how do you know all of that?
They're innate in all of us, but they've been, suppressed or dumbed down. I know it because I have been able to retrieve some of these abilities. So to be telepathic, it's not so mysterious. It's not like I can read your thoughts. It's and you know this. If when I describe it, you'll go, "Oh, I'm actually telepathic." We read each other. We're all like a billboard because we're energy. So everything about us is there in the field. And if you know how to read it, you'll pick it up. And you'll talk to someone and you just know things about them. You feel them. It's also like, if you've ever walked into a room and there's been a couple that have been arguing, but then they stop when you walk in the room, you feel that argument. You feel
Mm,
that energy. If someone that you know is in a bad mood, they don't have to say a word. You're like, uh-oh, better stay away from them today. I mean, it's all readable. It's all there. And we're all psychic. It's psychic. It's like it's that inner voice. It's that connection to the divine. How many times in your life have you like about to do something and you just hear this voice like, no, don't go down that alley, or no, don't, or whatever it is. You get a download, a thing, it drives you to a certain action that then later you look back and you go, oh, wow, like that was divinely led. And that's the other thing that these psychopaths don't want us to do. They don't want us to connect to our divinity. And you can live life like in a 3D world, which is the way they want us to live, or you can live life in a 3D world being guided by your divine higher self or God, right? And you never lose when you're connected to that guidance, because you can see it as a higher part of yourself, as God, whatever, is giving you this information all the time that you need in the moment that you need it. That's being telepathic. That's being psychic. It's receiving that guidance. It's feeling and knowing another person. It's reading another person, right? And at some level, civilizations that are at higher levels of consciousness than we are right now here, and I have memories of being in these places, so that's part of it too. Um, you can't lie anymore at some point. So with words, you can lie because you can say something that isn't true and somebody will hear the words and believe it. But when you're at that higher level, you can read everyone. So you'll be able to completely read an energy that's a lie energy versus a truth energy, right? And so for myself, I have this thing in my body where when I hear a truth, it's like a bell rings inside me. Like there's a certain feeling. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about too, right? You
definitely.
just know, but we're trained not to trust that. Okay. So we need to recover that back. And then we're so distracted and stressed and ill. If you weaken the body and you keep a population sick, their mind isn't going to be very strong, and then they're not going to be very connected to their soul. So it's all about disconnecting us. So we need to reconnect. So really, to reconnect with your divinity, you need to restore your body as much as anything else. You know, I mean, so these religions that say, oh, like, oh, the body is lesser or whatever. No, you're living in this body. It was given to you by the Creator. It's, you take good care of it. It's housing your consciousness in this dimension. It doesn't mean your consciousness doesn't exist in other dimensions without a body, but we're here. And the New Age program, which is a satanically created program, wants to disabuse us of. I hate that program because it's like it encourages people to spiritually bypass. And it's like, no, we're in this grounded reality. We have to be here and
You're
deal
right.
with what's in front of our faces, right?
Yeah, I fell for that program pretty hard for maybe the first 2 years of this podcast. My journey was, from that place to kind of just like, okay, like what's going on here? Like, I'm gonna like almost like pull out of the physical, if you will, right? Is all right, like renounce material stuff or renounce material objects. And luckily I eventually found out that that's, one of those programs you're talking about of, you get to the next layer and then there's another program there that is like almost blocking you from the next layer. And then it's just like there's extra ones piled on top of each other, if you will. And so, I mean, I think that's a very powerful one that I've seen through my now 3 years of having this podcast is it seems like there are a lot of very spiritual, very intelligent people who still like will espouse, oh, money doesn't matter. Oh, these things don't matter. But then they're charging $50 for their courses. And I'm like, to me, I always kind of was like, what's going on here? Like something's off. Like if it doesn't matter, then you should give me it for free. Oh no, you should be above it, but I need $50. And I'm like, it jarred me. I'm like, what's going on here?
That's a really good point. That's there's hypocrisy everywhere, but sometimes we don't see it. But yeah, no, absolutely. We live in a reality where the energy exchange, it's all about energy exchange. It's called currency because it's a current, right?
Mm,
Money is what we have to work with right now. And I think, again, more advanced civilizations, we will probably get to a point where money doesn't even exist, and we can manifest anything and everything. We are creators, right? But that ability has been dumbed down, and we're kept in stress. When you're in stress, you can't be your full self. So, but yeah, right now we live in a place where we need this money or some kind of exchange, right? And so, when if things kind of deteriorate, I mean, what did we used to do not that long ago, even 100 years ago? I mean, we bartered, you know. I'll trade you this for that or whatever. That's still an exchange of energy. There's always ways to do this, but yeah, these spiritual people, they charge, forget $50, they charge like $5,000
yeah.
for, but even this concept of, and I fell for the New Age program in the beginning too. I mean, we grow through programs. I fell for the feminist program too. You think something is good. I mean, I'm very embarrassed to say this, but when I was much younger, I fell for the liberal program too. Like I thought that they were good people doing the right thing till I realized, oh my God, no. So, that's okay. We're all, like I said, we're all deprogramming, one level at a time. But, if it, hey, it's pretty easy. It would be easier for me to put on a robe, go to the top of a mountain and meditate 8 hours a day. But am I helping the real world? Am I helping actually the situation on the ground, this war that's going on? I mean, yeah, maybe with some kind of love and light, but that's easy. That would be a lot easier than fighting here on the ground. And to actually, we're in matter. We have to do things. There's action that needs to be taken. And the formula for manifestation is an intent, a visualizing of that thing that you're trying to create. So let's say we're trying to create a new earth, right? A better world, a heaven on earth. It is important to know, okay, this is what I want to create, and to visualize it, like to imagine ourselves there. Imagine wow, like the sky is blue and the food is nutritious and children are running around and they're playing and they're safe. And, whatever we want to imagine of this new world, that's step two. And then and feel like, oh, I've got this. We're there. We can do this. But then you have to take that action in the 3D world. What am I going to do? Even one thing that I can do towards that goal. What can I do? And what can I join with other people to do? Right.
I love how simplistic that is, right? Visualize where you want to be, feel where you want to be, take an action that goes towards that.
Yeah.
It can be that simple.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the clock. I see we're running close on time, and I have so many more questions. I want to know about these past lives. I want to know about the psychic abilities more, but it looks like we're running close on time. So I just want to wrap this up, Max. I am beyond grateful for you being here. I know we didn't get too much into the things that happened in your childhood, but I just want to put it out there for people that if you want to go find those things, those are in a ton of other podcasts. First one that comes to mind is Masters of Self by Rachel Fiore, her podcast, which is very solid. Great person as well. So you go check that out if you want the horrific. We didn't get into it. I gave people the prep, but we didn't get into it. So, the Divinity has its own way, right? Max, thank you for being here. I do want to give you the time if you want to promote anything, leave final words for the audience. So this is your time to speak to the audience as you wish.
Thank you, Clayton. Yeah, thank you for having me. I do these podcasts because it's my way of trying to make a difference. So I have a website called unbroken.global, and there's actually a lot of interviews of me where I tell my story under Max Interviewed. So you can go to that tab. So if you want to know more about what I went through, I have described it when people have asked. I also interview other people who expose different parts of the cult and how it operates, people who are healers, who are teachers, who suggest things, practical things, ways forward that we can do, ways we can heal ourselves. And then I am, myself, I'm a psychologist, I'm trained in trauma. I work with people individually. So that's there on my website under services if you want to, look me up and need my assistance. So that's me. My content's also on Rumble, BitChute, Brighteon. I just created a Substack. I love to write, and I have a bunch of articles that are actually on my website, but I'm going to start writing on Substack, so that's coming soon. I'm going to create a class on trauma, what it is, how it affects us, and how we can deprogram ourselves and kind of restore ourselves to our full potential. So that's coming too, because we all need that. And what I just would like to say is, trust yourself. You are a piece of God on this planet. Your life is not meaningless. You're here. You came here to do something, to be something. So heal yourself, put yourself back together, and find that. I call it my mission. Find your mission. How can you help? We're all in this together. Stop falling for the divide and conquer. Come together yourself, come together with others, reconnect with the divine. It's a winning formula, and we've got this. The dark is going down. It's just very tumultuous as a beast dies, it's just thrashing about. And so don't attach too much to the negative. Know what's happening, but focus on what we want to create, what we want to go towards. Because as this thing dies, it's now up to us. There ain't no saviors. It's up to us to grow up and to save ourselves and to come together. And we will create, just ourselves can make a way better world than the one that we are currently inhabiting easily. So, just I want to leave people with that hope, because the most powerful force for us in the universe is love.
I love it. Let's end it on a positive note, because there's definitely brighter days ahead. So Max,
Yes.
Thank you so much, so much for being here. It was a pleasure and honor. Very appreciative of your wisdom, and thank you for being here. Guys, seriously, go check out her stuff. It's very, very fascinating negative connotation, but fascinating stuff. So with that being said, thank you guys for tuning into this transmission. And if I don't see you in this reality, then I know for sure we'll see each other in the 6th dimension.